also joined by a special guest, Laura Cuppage. For those of you who don't know us, Trellis is the charity that supports people working in care, health, education and community settings to garden with their clients, especially those with no gardening knowledge who are brushing up long forgotten skills. You can find out more about the support we offer to this sector and find links to all training resources online on the Trellis homepage. So like I said, we have a special guest today, Laura Cuppage. Laura has dedicated her career to combining her background in art, passion for the natural world, and love of inspiring others by working as a freelance artist and tutor. As ever, the aim of these online sessions is to inspire you to have a go at gardening activities with your clients. We'll be sharing lots of ideas to stimulate interest and interaction, and we'd love to hear about activities and techniques you've tried or questions about how to do any of these. We asked today that you use the chat function throughout the session to type in any questions, and Laura can answer them as we go through the session, but we'll also have time for a quick Q&A for any questions that aren't answered throughout the session. So today's session will be around 60 minutes long. We have a demonstration activity with Laura and a question and answer at the end. So I will hand over to Laura now to get started with our activity. Over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Lorna, and hi to everyone who's joining the session. So as Lorna said, I'm an artist and an art tutor and love connecting people with nature and art. I find it really mindful as well. It's something that takes me out of my own head. So hopefully through the session, you will also be able to experience that as well. So what I'm going to do is spotlight my drawing screen so everyone gets a nice big view of what we're going to be drawing today. And as Lorna said, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat box. So any art questions, if you want me to repeat a section or as we go through, we're going to be going through a nice step-by-step guide. Hopefully you'll be able to see that there. And if you have just got a pencil or a pen, then I'm going to give you some top tips of just using that. If you want to go into some colour as well, then you're more than welcome to use colouring pencils. I've also got some watercolours and I'm going to show you a few different techniques depending on what you're using. So we're going to focus on a beautiful September flower, a dahlia. Now there's lots of different species of dahlia out there. There's 42 species in total. This one is called the Julie one. And I absolutely love it. I think it's beautiful. It has some really lovely curling petals, not as curling as some of the other dahlias, but I think as a flower to draw, it's a beautiful subject. So we're going to use this one. I will keep this on my screen so you can still see what we're drawing. And we're going to attempt to do some shading with the watercolours and also the pencils too. Okay, so let's get started. I'll keep this on the page. Hopefully you will be able to see that nice and clearly. And we're going to start off with really the basic shapes of our subject. So when I go to drawing a subject, whether it be a plant, an animal, I look at the different shapes. So with the dahlia here, you can see that it's kind of divided into two circles. You've got the outside circumference of where the petals end, and then you've got a circle in the center where it all connects to. So we're going to draw them first. Now at this stage, it's quite handy not to press too hard. I will press down a little bit harder so you can see what we're drawing. But the best way to do it is kind of a light texture as you're going around. So then if you need to rub it out, you can do. Depending on how big you want to do it and how wide you want your petals to come out, that will be your first circle to map out where our petals are going to go. So then we're going to do that middle circle as well. And it's slightly off center. So if you were to divide your circle into four down lengthways and across, then it's kind of just off the side. Now it doesn't have to be exact. I like to think of drawing as quite a freeing exercise. So there's no, if you're looking at a subject and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to get caught up and I want it to look exactly the same, do not worry. A bit of artistic license. We get caught up in wanting everything to be perfect. So being able to change it slightly is a nice way to kind of free yourself up from getting too caught up on wanting things to be perfect. And actually, like in nature, they might look perfect, they might look symmetrical, but they all are slightly different. So hopefully that's what you will achieve today. So we've got our outside circumference and our circle in the center. We're now going to just map out where our petals are going to go. So you might be able to see here on my step-by-step guide, I've drawn some lines that are going towards the outer edge of that, that circle that we drew first. And that's just to guide us where we're going to put our petals. And a good way to do it is having a look at your subject and just kind of mapping out where you think the petals are going to go. So I can kind of see there's almost 2 layers, or 3 layers actually. You've got in the middle, which I think looks a little bit like an artichoke. So you can draw a few little lines going inwards, and then there's a few smaller lines coming out. Then you've got another layer that almost makes a star shape. And then you've got the back layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to work from the center outwards. And then so the ones at the bottom or at the back will just connect, instead of to the actual center, it will connect to the petals in front of it. Hopefully this is making sense to everyone. It's nice to see everyone's looking like they're enjoying it already, which is great. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a few lines. So we've got those lines that are going into the middle. Again, you can be free with this. It doesn't have to be exact. We've got a few that are kind of poking out from the center, which are your smallest petals. Then we've got a few that are coming out the next layer. There's a few coming here. These petals are really lovely to draw actually because they have got some twists and folds. And then I'm going to draw, so there's another one there. And then I'm going to draw the ones that are kind of connecting right to the edge of that circle. Again, you can be quite loose. They're kind of in between, very loosely in between the lines we've just drawn. The petals remind me a little bit of apple peel or the skin when you peel it off the apple. There's a few coming out here and another one up there. So what we have in front of us now is a very basic kind of skeleton, if you like. I know that flowers don't have skeletons, but it's kind of skeleton of mapping out how we're going to create the petals. So to bulk out the petals now, what we're going to do is start to fill in where those lines go. So if you can imagine these lines as the center of your petal, that's a really good way of working out how these are going to join together. So have a look a little bit at the reference image that we're following, but again, it can be nice and organic. And I'm going to start off with the smaller ones that are curling inwards to the center. And then I'm going to start to draw the ones that are on the side. And with these ones, they are a petal shape, but I'm kind of giving a bit of a flick to the side. Now, something that's quite nice to do if you want to experiment with the shapes of your petals is next to your drawing or on a separate piece of paper, you can actually experiment with your pencil, the kind of shapes that you want to create. So some of them are a little bit elongated, some of them have a little bit of a flick at the end. This one here, for example, is lovely because it curls up and then points to the end and then curls back round again. This one's got a real lovely point, and then the one behind that has almost a rounded edge. So they don't have to look exactly the same. They can look slightly different, and you can use that end of your lines that you've drawn as a guide to where they're going to point or where they're going to where they're going to be rounded off. So I'm kind of using the reference image as a bit of a guide. As you can see, I've kind of gone off slightly there, so don't worry if that happens with yours as well. Where are we now? We're working through these layers that are kind of above the ones at the back. So I'm going to add that one in here. And don't worry if they go over your lines that you've drawn. They are just a map of or a kind of a guide to where you're going. So you can still see them, but they might be slightly different to the reference image. But I do that on purpose because I think, as I said before, we get caught up in wanting everything to look perfect and come to an end result, when really it's actually the process of it. And a bit like gardening, the process of it, you just give it a go, and the end result will be really rewarding. So I'm just going round. Oh, I've missed these ones, so add them as well. There we go. Is everyone okay? You can pop on the chat box if you're okay, if you need any help. Everyone looks like they're okay, which is good. So now we're kind of seeing more of a flower rather than lines and circles. And the next stage, what we're going to do is add the petals that come behind. Now, what I really like is some of them are actually twisted round each other. Again, don't worry too much about these bits of texture just now. We're just kind of doing the, I'm going to add another one in here. So this is a good opportunity. If you do want to add some more, then you can add to it. So yes, don't worry about the textures for now, because we will add them in just a moment. So there's actually two petals on this side here. This looks like one big one, but you've got one that's kind of curling to its side and one that's opening up outwards. So I'm going to just add an extra petal in there. Then you've got this lovely one. This shape is gorgeous. It kind of curls around here. That's the one that looks a little bit like the apple peel, I think. And then this one, there is another one behind it. So you can use that as a guide. So it's more rounded. And then you've got another one that kind of comes around at the end there. And if it comes out of that line, that circumference line, then that's absolutely fine as well. Okay. So we're adding the last little bits in here. So you're just kind of creating the petal shapes that you can see from that reference image. Drawing as well as from a subject is relaxing, and it also focuses your mind, because you're having to really look at what your subject looks like, so you don't get too caught up in what you think it looks like. It allows you to appreciate the subject a lot more. There we go. So I'm quite happy with how my dahlia is looking. I think I could probably add another petal here. So I'm going to just draw another one. Again, bit of artistic license to make it a little bit more rounded. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to add the texture. So you've got the petals, and now we want to create these lovely kind of curves to the petals to make it look like it's got a bit more depth. And then that we can use them as well to guide us with adding texture and tone. So let's start with maybe this one here. So we can see that the general shape looks like a petal, but they overlap each other and kind of curl round. There's almost like a little jacket. So they're kind of, the petal is curled around and is touching. So we'll use this one here that I've created. And you again can use that kind of central line that you've used. It might have already created that line for you, so you can go ahead and use that, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to use that central line that has kind of come to the end and then curl round and back on itself. And then this creates that kind of overlapping curled effect. Again, I'm going to do that on the next petal round. So once again, that line that I already created has kind of created the side of the petal. But then I can see there's a line here that goes up and curls round to the center, almost looking like a little bit like a little boat. So I'm just going to add an extra line there. And then this will guide you as well if you're going to add color or tone, where the lighter color is going to be and where the darker color is going to be. So I'm going to do the same on this one, adding a slightly more curved line like that. I'm going to add the same on these ones. So making your way around, adding a little bit of a curve to your petals. Now, if you're getting a bit confused with all the lines that are coming around, you can feel free to rub out some of the lines that you don't need. So I'm going to rub out some of these central lines that are blocking my view or confusing me slightly on where the petals are. And that's when I said about not pressing too hard comes in handy, because then you're able to rub them out and you can see where you're going. So if you want to make sure that the petals that are at the front are nice and visibly at the front, then you can start rubbing out some of the lines that you don't need. So I've removed that. It brings that one to the front a little bit more. Just going to rub out that area too. And if some of your lines aren't rubbing out, then don't worry, because when we add some tone, you can disguise them slightly. There we go. Okay, so working around, adding these different bits of textures, using the reference image as a bit of a guide. Realize that I've maybe added a few too many petals, but again, that's absolutely fine. They're all going to look lovely, and all of them are going to look slightly different. So the Julie one, this one we're drawing, like I said, it looks slightly different to some of the other dahlias that we might be more familiar with. The most recent Gardener's World that was on last week, I think, they had a whole feature on dahlias, which was lovely. And there's so many of them, they're so beautiful. This one maybe is a slightly more easier subject to draw. Some of the other ones where they have the really, really curled, tight petals look a little bit intimidating. So I thought we'd try one that had slightly different open petals. So rubbing out some of those lines. This petal here is lovely. That looks more like one of those tighter curled petals that I was mentioning about the other dahlias have. But they're more of a tube-like look to them. So I'm going to add that one too. Most of the petals will have kind of a darker side revealing itself as it curls around. So even if you're looking at the reference image and thinking that you've got a few too many petals, like I do, then as you guide yourself around your petals, creating those different sections of the petal, then you can be guided by the other ones that you have drawn before. This one here has a slight indentation coming in. I'm going to rub that midline out. Also, actually, if you can see the midline that you've drawn as you've rubbed it out, then that's also handy for when you're adding tone to suggest where the darker bit of the petal will be. There we go. So just coming up to the last few petals now. Take your time with it as well. Don't feel like you have to do all of them at the same speed as me. Really enjoy what you're doing. Even if you don't finish it today on the session. You can continue to do it after the session with the techniques that I'm teaching you. Just going to add that on there. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how these petals are looking, and by just adding a few of those lines, hopefully you can see that we've added, we've created a bit more depth and texture to our flowers. Brilliant. So the next thing to do is to rub out those lines you don't want. So I am going to get rid of this circumference line around the outside. This gives us a little time for everyone to catch up if you're still sketching. Sorry if the screen shakes a little bit. I'm just going to rub out any of the lines that I don't want to be visible, like this. Dahlias, I think, are probably one of my favourite flowers. There's so many different varieties of them. The colours are beautiful. They don't produce a scent, so that is why they're so vibrant in colour, to attract pollinators. So like a lot of flowers that don't produce scent, it will be the colours that attract those little insects that are going to help pollinate. And they can come, depending on what species you're looking at, or they can come in lots of different colours. I think there's pretty much every hue in the dahlia world, apart from blue, interestingly. Not sure why, but blue isn't a feature or a colour of the dahlia. And dahlias originate and can be found in abundance in Mexico and Central America. They were actually declared the national flower of Mexico in 1963. There we go. So just getting rid, sorry about the shaking on the screen. The useful rubber, yes, it is a very good rubber. So I got it from an art shop, a craft shop. It's cool. I'll put it up to the camera so you can see it. Hopefully you can see it. Oh my goodness, my hands look so dirty. So I think it's KOHINOOR. So that's the brand. There we go. Yeah, that's the one. But you can get it from any art shop, have a look online. But another rubber actually that I need to invest in, which is really useful for things like this, is called a putty rubber. And you can actually manipulate it, so you can pull bits off, you can make it nice and thin and get into really awkward areas. So a putty rubber, I would say, is the best for yeah, getting into those tight spots that can be harder to get to. Great. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. Putty rubber, yeah, that's it. So we've gone through those step by steps. So we've gone from, just to recap, we've gone from the shapes that we can see, the guidelines of where the petals might be. We've added the shape of the petal, and then we've added these lovely kind of textures of the petals, these curves of the petals. And then we've rubbed out the lines that we don't want. So the next thing we need to do, or to do now, I mean, this is quite nice. If you just wanted to go over that in pen, you could. A fine liner or a biro works nicely. So you could go over the lines that you've drawn. I'm just going to give you an example here. Go over the lines you've drawn. If you want to, if you don't have a fine liner, absolutely fine. If you just have a pencil, you don't need to do this. But just as a few techniques to give you an idea of the possibilities of different things you can use. You can go over it with pen. You could leave it. Yeah, Lorna said the putty rubbers are excellent. They're very good. you can go over it with a pen, you can rub out those pencil lines, and it will give you a lovely kind of just basic outline of the flower, which can look lovely. You don't have to add tone if you don't want to. It's a lovely line drawing. If you are, what I'm going to do on my flower, I'm going to go round with different techniques, with different mediums, and then so you use whatever you want. If you've just got a pencil, that's what we'll start off with. If you've got coloured pencils, we'll go through that. And then I am going to just show you a little bit of a watercolour technique as well. So all pretty much following a similar rule, looking at light and dark. So we can see here in our dahlia that we've got the lovely yellowy peach in the centre, and then that kind of dark pink red on the outside of the petals. And to create that, we're going to use, whether it's the pencil or the coloured pencils, we're going to use texture and tone. So a good idea, again, like you did with your petals on the side, is to see the limitation of your pencil by adding different pressures. So I'm going to press really, really hard and then loosen my the pressure I'm pushing down as I'm working along the paper, and that will give you kind of a tonal index of how dark your pencil can go. You can do that with coloured pencils as well. And so we're going to start with the lighter colours first. And let's say we're going to take these 4 petals here. The lightest bit is going to be inside, but depending on if it's curled in or not, the lighter bit is going to be slightly darker, if that makes sense. So I'm using the side of my pencil really lightly just to colour in like an overall colour, and leaving kind of the tip of the petal without any shading in at all. And then I'm going to just press slightly harder where there'll be more tone tucked in, where the outside of the petal is coming around the inside. And then I'm going to press slightly harder again around the outside of the outer petal that's curling in, and slightly lighter to give a little bit of a lighter colour at the top of where the outer layer of the petal is curling round. And then I'm just going to go over the lines that I've already drawn to make it a little bit more defined. And I'm going to do the same again. So by playing around with your pencil and the different pressures that you're doing with your pencil, you can create some really lovely tone. And you can layer it up. So as long as you start off with a lighter pressure and then working up to the darker pressure, you will be able to create that lovely tone. You can even do a bit of a cross hatch as well. So that's where you're using your pencil one way and then you're going to cross it the other, and that makes it slightly darker too. I'm using if you're wondering what, I'm using a 3B pencil. 2B, 3B are probably nicest to use when doing shading. That's also what's nice to create with the pencils as well, is each petal has a bit of a linear texture, very loosely, because they're very delicate. But what you can do is you use your pencil to go down the same way the texture of the petal is going, and that will automatically create that texture for you. So see how I'm kind of dragging down my pencil. Again, slightly lighter pressure, a little bit darker as you get to where they're going to be tucking into each other. So the middle part of the flower will be a little bit darker as you're working out where the shade would be. If something's on top of something else, then there's going to be a little bit of shading underneath those petals. This one is curled around again, so a little bit of darker texture. You can even leave a few things blank and use your rubber as well as a shading tool. So the rubber's not always to erase mistakes or get rid of things you don't need that you've used whilst planning your drawing. You can use it as well to add really nice light areas to your drawing. That's great if you're drawing a subject that has a lot of light shining on it as well. Okay, so again, going to work around slightly darker on the outside here. I'm going to leave most of the inner petal on this one that I'm drawing, or colouring in, sorry, light. I'm going to maybe just add a little bit of tonal pencil flicks on each side, so from the tip where it's curling around and the base. And let's not forget these little ones as well. There's one tucking in here. So yeah, just have a really nice play around with what your pencil can do. Even if you're using a biro, biros can create some really lovely texture too. And it's, again, all about the pressure, pressing hard to create a darker tone, pressing lightly to create a lighter tone. This middle bit is quite intricate, so what I would be doing is just adding a darker, harder pressure on the inside. You can go around it again, you can press even harder to add those layers. They're a bit more intricate. Cool, so that's with that's the pencil. Colours, if you want to add some colours, if you have colours, I'm just going to make sure that I actually, sometimes if I'm going to use pencil colours, if I know I'm going to use pencil colours, instead of using the drawing pencil, so the graphite, I will actually draw in the colours that I'm going to use. That the example is here. So I've actually used the colours that I'm going to use to map out what I'm drawing. But if you rub out some of the thicker lines that you've drawn, it seems a bit counterproductive, doesn't it, rubbing out what you've just drawn, but it means you'll still be able to see what you've drawn underneath, but the colours won't blend too much in with the graphite pencil. Okay, so you can create some really lovely colours and tones with coloured pencils. Sometimes I use watercolour pencils as well, so you don't have to use watercolour pencils with water, you can just use them to blend. And I've got a few different colours here. I've got a yellow and an orange, and then a kind of purpley pinky red, which I think work really well, and then a bit of a green for the centre. So again, I'm going to do a similar thing to what we did with just the pencil, and hopefully you can see that on the screen. It looks a bit darker on the screen there, but I'm just pressing harder to make a kind of a darker colour, and then lighter to create a lighter colour. So we can see with the yellow in these petals, it's a darker yellow inside towards the centre, and it goes out into more of a peachy colour, actually blending into that red that's on the back. So we're going to use that as a guide, and I'm going to colour in, again, using almost the side of the tip of the pencil, and overall shading. I'm going to do all the, oh, sorry if it's wobbling. Do all of the lighter bits first. Remember, if you start off quite light, you can always work into it again. And then we'll do this one here as well. Maybe these ones too. It's almost like you've created yourself a colouring in book by doing the outside. Doing the outline first, and then you can colour inside. Okay, so I'm also going to use an orange to create the texture. So there's a little kind of bit of an orange in this dahlia, but it's mostly to create the kind of the texture and the tone of the colours. So what I'm doing, hopefully, I wonder if I can get it a little bit closer for you. So what I'm doing is I'm working the colours in together. So I've done the yellow, and then I'm using the orange just to accent where the slightly darker yellow tone is. And I'm, like we were saying at the, like I was saying before, with kind of following the shape of the petal with your pencil colour, it will create that kind of soft, soft kind of petal structure. So I'm just using the orange to go in from the top round where the slightly darker areas are going to be. And it's a nice way of blending a few different colours together to create a tone. So these Julie one dahlias, they're usually a kind of a peachy pink flower. So the orange and the yellow help to create that pink, peachy colour. And then they've got the reddy pink on the outside. But again, artistic license, if you want to go for a completely different colour than the ones that we're using, you are free to do so. No one's going to tell you it's wrong. It's all about enjoying the process of it. There we go. And now I'm going to add the outer colour. So again, like we were doing before, pressing, oh gosh, I think this is going to, there we go. Apologies if my pencil breaks. I'm going to do kind of a lightish, semi-light tone with this to start with. So that's on each side. I like to start off slightly lighter, and then I can always make it darker as I'm going on. And it's quite nice to leave a little bit of white of the paper coming through. I always think that looks quite nice because it looks like they're almost shining a little bit, I guess. So this one is almost completely, can't even see any of the yellow, this petal. So an overall shade there. I love adding the tone. This is the most mindful part of it, is when you're colouring it in. You've done all the hard work mapping it all out. And now you can really enjoy blending the colours together, or blending the tone together if you're just using your pencil, your drawing pencil. Okay, so I've got the kind of overall colouring there. And then I'm going to go in and press slightly harder like we did with our pencil, our drawing pencil. And I'm just going to do it on the sections that have the shade on them. So we can see it's kind of as it curls round and it connects to the inner inner petal, there's a little bit of light here where the light's shining on, so I'll leave that. It gets darker as it connects to the center and as each petal overlaps as well. Lovely. I'll show you how I will add a little bit of green to the center as well. And I'm kind of working around the petals, almost creating the petal shape as I shade. And that gives you a lovely soft texture of the way that the, oh, broke my pencil. I knew that was going to happen. Ooh. Okay. So I'm quite happy with that. You can add a little bit more orange, or you can blend the yellow to the tips of the outer shade as well, the outer petal, sorry, to kind of connect all of those colours together so they become one petal rather than sections. I'm just going over the top, doing a little bit of a blend all the way around. Just bring that up closer to the camera just so you can see what I mean there. By adding a little bit of the yellow to the outer petal, it blends it in and it brings it together and makes it one rather than a few different sections. Great, so if anyone is interested in the watercolour, I'm going to do a little demonstration on this section. I've probably got about 10 minutes left, so that's good. It goes so quick. Hope everyone's enjoying it. I just wanted to give you a few different options of creating the texture as well, so I thought I'd give you a little idea. Oh, I was going to say about the green, wasn't I? So what I would do for the colour here in the centre is colour in with this lovely pinky purpley red. That's where the darker colour is going to be. And then I'm just going to blend in some green. There's a slightly different green to the reference picture, but that's okay. And then I'm going to add a little bit of yellow on top as well to blend it all together. Using the lighter colour to blend together is a nice way of creating a few different colours within the ones that you have. And again, I was kind of moving around the shape of that interior petaled design in the centre there. Okay, so watercolour, pretty similar to what we were doing before, starting off with the light colour and getting a nice soaking on my brush. I'm going to use the yellow. I'm not adding water to the paper. I just added it to the paint. Colouring in the centre where the yellow bits are going to be. The watercolour is probably a little bit quicker. You can leave some white as well. Good thing about watercolour is if you want to get rid of some of the colour that you've put on, add some water over the top, use a bit of kitchen roll or toilet roll, and then you can dab it on and it removes some of that colour that you don't want. So I made it a little bit dark, but that's okay because I've just removed it. Gone to a slightly thinner brush and added some more paint onto my brush there. And to add the tone, I am just adding a few flicks of paint to the areas that are a bit darker on that yellow. You can even add, I'm going to take a little bit of that off, using the tip of my my roll there, my kitchen roll. You can even add a little bit of the orange. So I'm mixing a little bit of yellow and red together. And you can add that to create a little bit more of a tone. Sometimes you can do a lovely bleed as well, which would mean putting a lot of water onto your page. Let me see if I can do that with this one. So adding a bit more water to the page than I did before. And then popping your colour on top, and it bleeds together nicely. And that can create a lovely petal texture. Playing around with it is nice and fun as well. Now we're going to add the redder outside colour. Try to let it dry as much as possible before adding the darker colour, because it might all run together. But again, that might be quite nice as well. I'll show you, demonstrate on this bit. It will bleed all together, which is it is a nice effect. It's a bit more freeing than the controlled pencils. I'm going to go for a slightly drier brush, add in the tone and the colour to my brush. And again, following through the lines. Maybe this red is a little bit dark, but that's okay. It's almost a bit like painting by numbers, this. But I'm kind of doing a similar thing, that the more paint you add to a section, the darker it's going to be. Dragging the paint the same direction as the petals. And if you start off with a slightly lighter blend or wash, then you can add, once it's dry, you can add the texture on top. I even sometimes combine the two. My favorite way of working is watercolor, let it dry, and then add the pencil on top. That's a lovely effect as well. It's amazing how one subject you can use so many different ways of creating texture and color. So yeah, it's a little bit freer than the pencils that we were doing. That blend of with the heavy water on the paper is quite nice, actually. I don't usually go that way, use watercolors that way, but really enjoying it. It's lovely. So I'm going to finish off my flower with watercolor, I think. And you can finish off whichever way you want. If you don't, again, like I said, if you don't finish it through the session, then continue to do so, continue to add colour, add shading afterwards until you're happy with it. What time are we on? It's got a few more minutes. So I'm going to get to a point where I'm happy with this. Adding the yellow. So the watercolour can be a little bit quicker than the pencil, but don't rush it. How would you go about using those watercolour pencils? Okay, Nikki, so let me show you that on some of these petals I've got left. There's a few different ways you can do it. I always remember at school being taught never to dip the pencil into the water, but we're not at school. So if you want to do that, you can. So you can dip it into the water and again, use it as a paint, but also as a pencil at the same time. So that is creating almost a nice controlled way of colouring in. So you have dipped it in and it's become the paint like this. Or alternatively, you can do some shading. I'm just going to show you it on the side here, like we were doing before. So use the pencil as a pencil, add in the shading. Sorry if it's wobbling. I'm layering up all the different colours. They blend actually really nicely as well as just colouring pencils. And then what you can do is add water to it. So using your brush, you can add the water on top. And they blend really nicely. Like that. So there's a few different ways you can do it. So colouring in first, adding the water second, or dipping and colouring on top. And actually, does this work as well? Adding water to the page and then colouring on top. It's a little bit more structured actually. That gives quite a nice effect. Maybe if you're doing a quick sketch of some flowers, you could do it that way. It's all about experimenting really. It's you can use it in lots of different ways. And if I was to add the pencil on top of the watercolour I've done, it's probably just dry enough, but I would just simply, like we were doing with the coloured pencils here, I would add the tone on top of the painting, and that creates some really nice depth actually. I really like that petal. It's probably my favourite petal of the session. There we go. Okay, so that pretty much brings us to the end of the demonstration. It's gone so quick. I hope you've enjoyed it. And if you haven't finished colouring in, please keep on doing it. But I discussed before, if you would like to, remember we are recording. What's really nice is what you can do is pop your camera on if you want to. It's completely up to you. And if we remove the spotlight, I'm going to remove the spotlight from my drawing board. Sorry, technical glitch. And if you want to go on gallery mode and hold up all of your pictures, I would absolutely love to see it and see how you have got on. So feel free to put on your camera and hold up your picture. Lovely, so nice. Oh, they're so lovely. I hope you've enjoyed it, everyone. They look wonderful. Very, very lovely. It's so lovely to see everyone's different styles. That's my favourite part of the whole thing. Wonderful. Looking lovely. Well, thank you so much for joining. I think I will pass you back to Lorna, if that's okay, just to wrap up. But I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you found some tips that you can take with you and draw other subjects when you're looking at other things to draw. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Laura. That was great. Do we have any last questions? Jenny, is there any questions that we've not answered? Does anybody have anything that they'd like to say?
Yes, Margaret was asking, Laura, was that a graphite pencil that you used at the very end?
Oh, at the end. So I was actually just using to draw the actual picture. Do you mean?
I think at the very end, I think maybe you could explain the excuse me, watercolour pencils and what are they? Are they different from coloured pencils?
Yeah, so watercolour pencils you can get from anywhere. If you just type in if online, you can. My ones are actually from WH Smith's, but you can get them. They're water soluble. Basically, they're a slightly different lead. I don't know exactly what it is. They're a slightly different one to a regular colour pencil. So with a regular colour pencil, if you added water, it wouldn't blend. But if you bought some watercolour pencils, it means that adding water would create it into the paint. So it's almost like you're using an actual watercolour block,
okay,
but at the end of the pencil, if that makes sense.
Sure, okay. So I hope that answers your question, Margaret. If not, please type in again and let us know. We had some lovely comments there that actually came to me instead of going to everyone, so I'll read them out there. Margaret again says, it's amazing what can be done with the minimal equipment and materials. Beautiful end product can be produced and so relaxing, she says, so thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Margaret. And yet, honestly, you don't need a lot at all. I think with art, sometimes people get a little bit intimidated with it, but it's about having fun. And I'm glad you enjoyed it.
That's lovely. I think there's some other comments as well. Nikki says, great, it was great, thanks very much as well. So that's lovely. There was another question there, sorry, a technical one about, that was a rubber. Sorry, I'm having to scroll just to find it.
No, that's absolutely fine.
Oh no, somebody was asking about watercolour pencils and you told us about those, so that's lovely.
And if you were wondering what the pencil was that I was using to like shade at the beginning or to draw, it is just a standard traditional 3B pencil that you can get from lots of different art supply retailers. You can get them online. Yeah, you can. So that's what I was using. But go for a slightly softer one if you want to add the texture. So 3B. They're the ones that I like to use most.
Lovely, thank you. Margaret says perfect, you answered her question. That's lovely. I wondered if I could ask Laura, have you any tips for our audience, because they will be doing these kind of things with groups of people.
Yeah.
So any tips on how they can do a drawing session like this with a group, but in person, what's your sort of top steer?
So I would just say, if you are going to have a group of people, just make sure you've got a reference image to hand. So whether that's projected or you print it off nice and big, or if you've got a few people, maybe having a few printed off on a table, because it is good to have something there to look at. If you can get hold of the actual flower or whatever you're drawing to have in front of you, then that's also a really good top tip. I have got a few step-by-step guides. I actually sent them to you, but if you want them, you can always contact me as well, which I'll just quickly put my email. Is that okay to just put my email in the chat?
Yes, please.
Perfect. So I find a step-by-step guide really helpful when teaching. It reminds me as I'm teaching as well. Sorry. Quite good at talking and drawing, but maybe not typing as much. So that is my email. So feel free to contact me and I can send that over to you, the one that we've done today, if you want it. There we go, I've popped that in the chat there. So laura.cuppage@gmail.com. And just having your equipment ready and available. So the rubbers, the pencils, the colouring pencils, having it all out on the table. They would be my top tips. Preparing your materials, having your reference picture, and maybe a guide if you need to. And And remember just to let everyone know to have fun and that there's no pressure.
That's great. Robert's asking a question. Can you use a standard colour pencil to colour over an area of wet watercolour?
Yes.
Or should I use a watercolour pencil
No.
before this?
That's a really good question, Robert. So actually, when I went into the, so I'd done the painting, and then I actually use a standard pencil to go over the top to create that petal there. I don't know if you can still see the screen. I actually find that works better if you want to create more of a texture. So you can do a watercolor, you can paint in watercolor, let it dry, and then add your standard color on top. If you want to experiment with adding the watercolor pencil on top as well, you can, but if you want to get more of a kind of structured actual line, then using one that isn't water soluble is better. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you for that. Someone's asking, how do they get the recording of this to finish up later? We're going to be uploading the recording to the Trellis YouTube channel, and that it'll definitely be up next week, but I hope to get it up later this afternoon. Fingers crossed. But if you just go to the Trellis homepage and click on the YouTube icon, you'll get there, and it'll be up there later today. Robert says thank you for your answer there. That's great. Has anyone got any other questions that they want to that has occurred to them, and they can just give us a quick message in the chat there? I think that might be all the questions for Laura.
Satisfied?
Thank you very much, Laura. We're also going to be sending out some notes after this, so we'll attach anything that Laura can give us by way of hints and tips in that message, which will probably come out tomorrow as well. Back to Laura, thanks.